All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Higher Education Governance Oversight panel discussion. Please join me, first of all, in welcoming our two panelists today. First, we have Chairman Carla Metzler, the board chair of North Central Texas College, and then Regent Robert Gaunt of the UT Board of Regents. Thank you all for being here.
You're welcome.
Thank you both for being willing to participate on this panel discussion. I know in some of our prep meeting we've expressed our excitement on this topic. I myself, I'm Kano McWinney. I serve as the Secretary to the Board of Regents and Special Advisor to the Chancellor of the Texas Tech University System, a position I've held for the last 5 years. Before we get started with the program, I'm just curious, a quick show of hands of those of you in the audience who are associated with two-year institutions. If it's a two-year institution, okay?
Oh, wow.
Alrighty. And then, not to make the assumption, but those who are affiliated with four-year institutions? Okay. So probably about 60-40 on that. Okay, very good. Thank you all for that. So over the next 35 to 40 minutes, we will engage in what I hope to be an interactive conversation on the topic of higher education governance and oversight. And I look forward to the collective insight of my panelists here to my left. This panel is part of training requirements for newly elected and appointed members of governing boards for 2- and 4-year institutions. Per the Texas Education Code, this panel will focus on the official role and duties of members of governing boards, including the role of the governing board at institutions of higher education and the relationship between the governing board and the institution's administration, faculty, students and staff, and including the limitation on the authority of governing boards. It's my understanding that this is also being recorded for future training purposes. Before we dive into the discussion, I'd like each of the panelists to introduce themselves, starting with your name and occupation and the institution for which you serve as a board member.
Okay. My name is Carla Metzler, and I am the board chair at North Central Texas College. In my professional life, I'm a small business owner for the last 38 years, a partner of Xerox Corporation, run a technology company. I've been on the NCTC board for almost 17 years, and prior to that I served as the board chair for the North Central Medical Center, North Texas Medical Center, which is the hospital district in Gainesville. I'm also currently serving as the secretary of the Community College Association of Texas Trustees.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Robert Gant. Live here in Austin and founded and CEO of Capitol Creek Partners, which is a multifamily investment office. And I'm on the Board of Regents of the University of Texas System. Prior to that, I was a board member of the Teachers Retirement System, 2008 to 2011, and then UTEMCO. So I worked with handling the teachers. And then I was on the endowment board of UTEMCO 2017 to 21. No, actually 23, sorry. And in between there, I was on the higher ed coordinating board and then joined the Board of Regents about a year and a half ago.
All right. Thank you both for those introductions. So just in terms of a format, we'll go through a series of scripted questions, so to speak, in order to meet the training requirements. And then at the end, we'll allow for about 5 to 10 minutes for audience questions and participation at the end there. So we're going to dive right into the questions here. So let's first start off with why. Serving on a board of higher education is said to be one of the highest honors one can do. So tell us what made you decide to serve on a board of higher education. We'll start off with Chairman Metzler.
So I'm sure by the show of hands that many of you know that serving on a 2-year institutions board is an elected position, just like that of your sheriff in your community, your county attorney, or any elected position. So I have a keen sense of importance in my life is education. My husband is a recently retired school superintendent, so education is just something extremely important. The the difference that in a four-year institution, whereas as you'll hear from Robert here, I'm sure, is that they're appointed. So I think it's the highest honor that one can have bestowed upon them is to be elected by your peers to serve in a role that is respected in your community. So I take it extremely seriously, and I congratulate everybody that steps up to the plate.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, mine was an interesting path. I was living in Houston. It was 2000, early 2000s, and I felt this desire to give back to the state. And I had a very heavy investment financial background, having lived in New York 3 times, in London, and getting my master's degree. And I had a friend that was involved with Texas politics, and I went and had lunch with him. And I said, hey, what do I do if I want to give back? And my grandparents were educators, and education saved my life. That's a whole nother story, which I can talk about later. But literally, it saved my life. And my grandparents would preach to me, get your education. I was always playing sports, and they're like, get your education, get your education. And I'm going to be a professional baseball player. And they're like, no, you're not. You're going to need to get your education. And they didn't tell me it that harsh. But so I just put it out there and got a call one day going to a Little League practice. And they said, would you like to serve on the teacher's retirement board? And I'm like, no, I'm too busy. And they're like, you can't say no. Literally, my friend goes, you can't say no. This is really important. Teachers of Texas pension. So that started my journey, and I love everything the state does around education. It's the lifeblood of our community and our state. And so I felt a calling just to give back and get involved, and it led to UTIMCO, it led to the Higher Ed Coordinating Board, and then the Board of Regents, which is an appointed 17 years. I'm going to there's no way I'd be reelected that many times. So congratulations.
All right. Well, thanks for that insight. So, the next question is building on that. The word or trustee or regent gets thrown out, but what does the role of being a regent or a trustee mean to you, even when given consideration to the differences between 2-year institution and a 4-year institution? What does it really mean to be a regent?
Me to go first? I think that it gives you an opportunity to change people's lives. I, too, was preached forever, you have to go to college, you have to go to college. I'm a first-generation college student and graduate from my family, and it was extremely important to my parents. So I think that it's more than just, it was instilled in me that I just finished high school and went straight to college. But I think it's also the thing that allows me to participate in doing the best that I can to improve my community, but also to really work on eliminating poverty. I feel like that without education, it's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to eliminate poverty. So I feel like that giving back in this educational environment really does allow me to have that great impact.
And I would just say amen to that. I mean, that's what drives me too. I wrote down stewardship, and I think, fiduciary is a word that gets used a lot. Which is important. We are fiduciaries for protecting our institutions, and these are bigger than us. There's going to be many more regents coming behind us, and so we have a duty to steward what's already in place and protect it, and then improve it if we can along the way, and to make us better and more adaptive in our state to needs. And I also wrote down being an active participant and really being passionate and engaging, and that's clear from Carla here for sure. And making sure that we understand, and I don't want to jump ahead too much, but understanding the priorities of what we're really doing. And so I think stewardship's an important word for me in my journey.
Oh, wonderful. And your answer, and we'll stay with you because it segues nicely into a follow-up question. That's kind of the definition of it, but are there certain characteristics or traits that you see as critical? We have some new regents here, and character can be harnessed and developed, right? Mm-hmm. So what are some characteristics or traits that you see that are beneficial in being a regent?
Yeah, I mean, there's some non-starters, right? Integrity is a non-starter. I think being humble. And I never want to say that I'm humble because that's not a humble statement, but being a good listener, being humble, and not thinking you have all the answers, and understanding who the constituents and the shareholders are. And then, I went back this morning and reread the UT system and the Higher Ed Coordinating Board mission statement. And, that's posted in our rooms, in our boardrooms. And so I think being a good listener, being humble, and then being intellectually curious. There are areas that I have no clue when I go to my meeting. This is like overwhelming. You give me numbers and budgets and audits, I'm like, and then you give me into the healthcare system, and I'm like, oh. But I know who around the room and on the board is a professional and an expert in the areas I'm not. And then I think, and this is something that took me some time, but don't be afraid to ask why. Because there's a temptation and a tendency just to go along, because these meetings go fast and there's a lot to cover. But asking why, not getting too deep, but asking why is, I think, really important.
Yeah, I would totally agree with what Robert said. I also think that being a good team player is important. It is not about you as an individual. It's about the student, the institution, and in the case of a two-year director or a regent, it's about the constituents that you serve. So there's another person who's kind of in your ear about, tax rates and various things that go on at the college, what makes it a little different. But overall, I think just being a good team player and understanding that when it happens at the board meeting, the votes are taken and you walk out of the room, we all decided the same way, no matter which side of the chair you sit on.
That's a very, very thing. Can I just?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because my first experience at teachers' retirement, we had a lot of 5-4 votes, a lot. And I was a freshman board member, and I'm like, oh, and people aren't getting along. They're like, no, this is how it works. And then you walk out, and everybody, there's not pointing fingers and, well, I can't believe those two went that route, and there's none of that. It's a collective yes, regardless of, you want 7 2s and 9 0s, but sometimes and being a good team player is, sometimes you're going to be on the winning side, sometimes you won't.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you for those. Okay, so I think every meaningful publication that talks about higher education governance wrestles with this particular topic. So how should a regent or trustee distinguish between their governance role and that of the role of management or administration?
Okay, my answer is fairly short. You really, as a board member, you really only have to deal with the governance role, leaving the management operation up to the CEO. That's their job. We hire him or her to do that job. And simply said, you always go to the CEO if you have, if someone brings you a problem. You might ask that person just because they're a constituent in your voting area that, have you followed the, proper chain of command. But ultimately, any comment that you make, the CEO needs to be involved.
Could I ask you to say, so from a practical standpoint, could you walk us through a scenario, let's say?
Okay, so my son got a grade that he just didn't really deserve. And in a small town, you run into people at the grocery store, at church, and they know you sit on the college board. So I would immediately ask them, have you visited with the teacher, or has your son or a daughter visited with the teacher? And then I would go to maybe the dean of the department and kind of give them some guidance so they don't think that you're just blowing them off. But at the end of the day, I always would report that to our chancellor to say, hey, this communication came to me, this communication, I gave them this direction, and didn't just turn them over to the chancellor, because that's not his role either. Right, so that's the example that I would say. Pointing them in the right direction. Yes,
yeah, absolutely. Regent Gott?
Yeah, I think governance is oversight, and management is execution, and there's policy versus process. So, as board members or regents or trustees, we are in the policy, and one of my board members at the higher education coordinating board always says, fly 20,000 feet. Fly 20,000 feet. And that's really hard for me. Really hard for me. I have 10 questions about everything. And if I were able to do that and 5 other board members wanted to ask him, we'd be there for 2 days. And so learning your role, your giftedness, and then get a lot of the questions answered before the board meeting is really important. So my diving happens the week of or the week before,
Right.
so I don't stall the meetings.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I just piggyback on that being a staffer in the board office. Oftentimes, some of those inquiries will come in directly to the staff, and so relying on your staff as well
Yeah.
to appropriately allocate inquiries.
Yeah, on the inquiry side, yes, absolutely. Agree.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, so a key function of higher education governing boards is serving, you mentioned earlier, the idea of fiduciary duties. So serving as a fiduciary for the institution under your governance is a key function. The fiduciary duties go beyond simply approving budgets. How have you come to understand your role as a fiduciary? We'll start with you this time first, Regent Gott.
Yeah, I think getting a good understanding of how the institution works, who are the players, the chain of command, and then understanding the strategic plan and the mission. And because if you don't understand the strategic plan and you don't understand the mission, then the fiduciary can get personal, it can get political, it can get all sorts of ways, which we never want. That is the wrong way to govern. And then I think, when there's issues and challenges, things you have to work through, it gets back to listening and learning about the different areas, the different committees, and just observing until you get comfortable. And then I think getting back to the stewardship and then where you have strengths on the board. Like mine are in finance and investments. It's not in other areas. So I try to lean on other people. But I think understanding the strategic plan is so important in holding, the board and the committees along that bigger path of vision and strategic plan.
We actually instilled under, as I became chair, the functions of committees. And that's a popular way to do things at our college, and at others, they don't like committee work. Personally, I think it's very beneficial because it allows not a quorum of the board to meet and discuss things and really dive into the budget, let's say at the finance committee or the student success at the student success committee. So I feel like that right there has given us a way to collaborate and understand, meet with the leadership of the institution so that we understand what their thoughts are around the particular subject and gives them an opportunity to just really educate us on the decisions that we're going to be faced with at a board meeting.
Yeah. No, I think, and you both touched on this idea of the committee and utilizing the committee, which ties nicely into the next question. What are some helpful strategies for being informed and prepared at a board meeting? And not to lead too much, but I think committee work is one of the answers to that question. But
So I would say definitely committee work. I would also say read the agenda, reread the agenda, reread the material, reread the agenda.
Yeah.
I think it's important to be prepared. You're there to perform a duty for, in our case, typically an hour and a half, 2 hours at a board meeting that we meet monthly. And it's not fair to the people that prepare the information if we're not prepared to come and effectively listen and ultimately vote for the action items on the agenda. And I think the only way to do that, because it is hard. I mean, there's a lot of things. I'm not an expert in all of the different areas of the college, but we do have a very vast, different type of individuals on there. We have construction people, we have banking people, we have people that understand finance. So I feel like we have a very good cross section, and that definitely helps. But working in committees has been our biggest success for that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think also I'm there's 4 or 5 committees on the Board of Regents at the UT system. I'm not on 2 of them. I could not pay attention and not have read the material, even though I'm not on those committees. So I think it's a real, because you're going to be on that committee so what I do is I read the committee material I'm not on, and I listen into it intently and really try to understand it, because there's going to come a time where I'm going to be on it. I think preparation, and I've been preparing for, I had an outside private equity partner for a long time. I had to prepare in advance a lot. But prepare in advance, and for me, it's reading the material once and not hurried. Take your time, take notes, and then I read it again more intently. So there's a process of kind of figuring out what are the issues, what's the agenda, what decisions are we trying to make, and then I'll dive deeper. And that starts seven days before the meeting. That's typically when I get my notebook. And then staying engaged between meetings. Because and we all know these members, and I've had meetings where I was so busy I just showed up and I wasn't prepared, and it was obvious. Right. I mean, it just, and that's okay. It's going to happen, but I also shouldn't be influencing and leading decision making if I'm not prepared. I strongly believe in that. So I think staying engaged between meetings and developing relationships with the senior staff. I have the good fortune of being in Austin, so I can run over to the system office. I can say, well, how does this work? And we get on a whiteboard and we kind of figure things out. So, and then asking for guidance from more senior board members. I grabbed a mentor my first meeting. I knew him from Houston, and he's just incredible. And I'm like, okay, help me. What do I, and he would challenge me. He'd say, you need to dive into numbers more. I'm like, no, we're not supposed to stay 20,000 feet. And he goes, no, that's your area. You're allowed to dive in that area. So I think those are things, but preparation is everything.
Yeah.
And it takes work.
It does. It does. No, great points. And I believe I haven't read the bylaws or Regents rules for every system in the state, but generally speaking, your board material is required to be prepared to you a week up to 2 weeks in advance. And so, taking advantage of that material being available early and picking up the phone and making those calls as needed if there is an area of concern. I know as the board secretary, for these meetings are publicly live broadcasts and they're permanently recorded, and so I want my regents to look good and sound good in this permanent record. So I'd much rather that question on the front end to get clarification rather than at a dais having a potentially embarrassing situation. So very good. Thank you all. Okay, so as members of university governing boards, you may receive direct requests from outside and internal stakeholders to act on countless issues, and it literally is countless, but it could be everything from, you gave the example earlier of disciplinary matters or disagreement between faculty or leadership. How best should you handle those type of requests?
You
can go first.
Sure, I don't. Yeah, I think we're going to have.
Probably don't.
I think we're going to have the same answer.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no. Look, I've had a few. And my first call is to the chancellor.
Yes.
Period. I don't call other board members. I don't ask them. I don't troll for. There's none of that. I go to the chancellor first, or legal or in-house counsel, which is Stacy Napier for us. And Stacy and I have become very close. Like, Stacy, I need help. And she goes, I'll handle it. And then you stay out. Mm-hmm. And then you get out. You don't come back in and try to figure out how it got resolved, or do I need to go communicate back to that person? It's over. And that's something that I've been doing since I've been on all these boards. Just like, send it to the right people, leave it alone, and move on. So.
Yeah, I would totally agree. We could be a situation where at the end of a grievance that might come up, you would be the final judge and jury of that grievance. So you really don't want the details. You just want to turn it over to the right folks, and in our case, that would be the chancellor. And we don't have internal counsel, but we would engage counsel, of course, if we needed it.
And the chairman, too, is an important person
Yes.
for us. Yeah.
No, I think, in your answer, I think one of the important part is the appropriate channels of communication, redirecting those requests to the appropriate channels of communication. Thank you. Like many industries in higher education is not exempt from its challenges. I think earlier today, with one of the panels, there was a discussion about the perception of the relevance of higher education today. Board members, you'll be faced with times where you're making big and difficult decisions around challenges. Can you share some advice or lessons learned in how to handle those difficult situations and ultimately reach decisions as a board?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I think it's important to always allow everyone to be heard. Allow them their opportunity to speak about the particular topic, whether that's at a board meeting, committee meeting, because that's their opinion. And then try to gain consensus and work as a team. And I think I said it earlier for sure that you're going to vote at the end of the day, and the vote is the vote of the board. Majority rules. So you're going to win, and sometimes you may not agree with the decision that was made. But it would be disastrous to the organization for you to go back out into the or to the staff or to whoever was a part of this particular topic and say things that are definitely inappropriate about your decision after the vote has been taken. So anyway, I feel like that our board does a really good job of trying to stay focused on the subject, engaging the right people, and allowing everyone to be heard.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think remember the mission first. When you're starting to make decisions, go back to your mission statement and strategic plan. And I'm just going to read some of this because I don't want to miss it. Gather all the facts from both sides. I like to go last. It's just I don't like to take the lead in conversations when I don't have enough information. And we all know people that will talk their way into what they're trying to say. They do it verbally. And they start, it's like 15 minutes, and they finally get there. And that's fine. Everybody has their different way of doing it. But I think listen more than you talk. Think through the options and the impact of each option. And is there a solution that serves the mission of the organization? Stay humble through the process. Words matter. When you say things it's words matter a lot. And so think through what you're saying. Be precise and clear. And then for me, my style is more sitting in the background, listening, because I'm new on the Board of Regents. I'm learning. And then I like to condense things in bullet points and just say, okay, here I think these are the issues, here are the concerns, and here's what I think. I usually get in trouble when I go early and talk too much, so that may help.
So I'm going to piggyback on that because it just dawned on me here that you both sit on boards that oversee multiple campuses. So sometimes these difficult decision might be making a decision that might impact different universities within your system or in campuses in different ways. How has that played out in your time as regents, to the extent that you're willing to share on recording?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think that each campus or university location within the system probably has different culture. So you have to always keep in mind, there's different staff, there's different faculty, there's different students. So I think you always do have to keep in mind of the campus. And then, it's nice to have everything the same everywhere, but that doesn't always meet the need of everywhere. Mm-hmm. So I think you do have to meet the students where they are. You have to understand that culture so that we're delivering the right direction for the particular campus that we're addressing.
I agree with that. I think it really applies when you're hiring new presidents, because there are credentials and resumes that are world class, and then there's the community they're serving and who's best fit. And we've gone through that just recently. And so we have 9 universities, 5 healthcare systems, and 260,000 students in a $35 billion budget. So it's a big, big system, and it is very overwhelming at first. And so what I did early, and I'm still doing, is I traveled around to the universities, getting to know the presidents, meeting people, going to commencements, and really trying to learn their culture and their campus. I mean, UTEP is completely different than University of Texas, right? And wonderful in so many ways. It's just an incredible. And then when it comes to the hiring, matching culture, city, community needs really, really matters.
Yeah, yeah. In the tech system, we have a campus in El Paso as well, and one of the things that it took me probably a couple of years to remember is they're on a different time zone. So,
Yeah,
so
good
you,
point.
you're
Right.
working with UTEP, making sure you're setting that meeting. That's 8 o'clock Central. It's 7 o'clock their time,
Yeah,
and
good
just
point.
being mindful of those.
That's
things.
true.
So anyhow, all right. So the final question before we open it up to the audience is this one. In today's world, the value and continued relevance of higher education has been a topic of wide conversation in various service circles of the public landscape. As a regent or trustee, what would you say about the value and continued impact of higher education in the state of Texas and beyond?
Go ahead.
So I've already mentioned this in the beginning, but to me, there's every state needs land, water, electricity, money, and education. And when companies move, I think there's 55 Fortune 500 companies in Texas now. California has, I think, around 58. We've had 4 million new people move to Texas in the last 10 years, and we're going to have 10 million move here in the next 10 years. And these companies that are coming, they look for good workforce, educated students. And so to me, education is the lifeblood of the community, and it is the ticket out of poverty. There's no doubt. And I think providing opportunities to everyone, it should be the goal, and we're trying. We just did a Promise Plus program that we've funded $500 million to give scholarships to students or children that live in families with adjusted gross income less than $100,000. We just gave another $35 million to that program, and that's the part to me that's so important. Is there shouldn't be, and this is my a little bit of my idealistic thinking, but any kid that wants to go to college, a 2-year community or 4-year, should be able to. Money should not be the issue. And that's something that I'd love to see solved. But it's important. And the last thing I'll add there, and I don't mean to, but the need for STEM jobs in our state is significant. 47% of all the job openings require some sort of STEM related skills. And it's something that's happening. When Tesla came and Elon came, he came because of the job opportunities and the universities that we have in our state. So something to always keep in mind.
Yeah, so since the inception of community colleges, we were really designed to address the workforce of Texas. And I think we are really working together as a collective group through our organizations to try to meet those needs. And I think the higher education should always provide good advising to develop pathways for students and minimize their investment, because that's what they're looking for. It's one thing to provide somebody something that we think is important, but we need to provide what they think is important. I also think it's important to provide for making sure that what they get at the end of the day is a credential of value. If they're not going to be able to put that degree to work, then we probably have fallen short on them understanding that they got what they paid for. And then I think at the end of the day, as long as you're in it for the right reason, and that's the student first, that how can you go wrong? If you're sitting there and you're making decisions that affect students, and understand, I'm sure every mission statement in the entire state has something about the student in it. So if we live up to that, I think we'll be in great shape.
All right.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Good.
Wonderful. Good closing. All right. At this time, we're going to open it up for a few questions from the floor. If any of you have any burning questions on what it will be like. Okay.
This one's pretty tactical, but I think has broader strategic underlying. Can you say more about the purpose of the specific board meeting? And then a little context there is 2.5 hours, maybe longer. But it seems there's a lot of meat. How does that at the top of the pyramid, how should that be structured with everything else under the iceberg?
Okay, I'm going to repeat the question just for the recording purposes. So, in summary, speak to the purpose of specific board meetings. In other words, prioritizing maybe the topics that are covered at a given board meeting.
Well, more like, what's the purpose of that meeting?
Okay. The purpose of the meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can answer that. There are some things that you have to approve as a region added to your institution. There are things that are brought to you for informational purposes, but I believe that the real purpose of the agenda is to ensure that you're getting the information that's required by law. Approving the minutes because those are recorded is probably and all the action items that follow. So they can't make those decisions. The board has to. Is what I would say is the real purpose of the agenda.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And a lot of the work gets done in committees. Mm-hmm. It comes to the board, and then there's an agenda, obviously, and then there's action items, and there's a compliance responsibility for audit in different areas that the board has that responsibility. And we have 4 meetings a year, and they're 2 days, and they're 4 hours on Wednesday, 4 hours Thursday. And Wednesday's kind of you have the committees, you go through everything, and then you vote. Thursday's the more public forum, and so some of it's just legal governing, and the other is just making sure we're staying on top of being in compliance.
Right, right. And of course, there are certain circumstances. I believe it's fair to say it during COVID in 2020, a lot of boards were meeting more than the regular schedule permitted. So you had a lot of special called meetings, and so at times you might have to take emergency action. So of course that might be a meeting specific to that as well. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Question, reference to your comment, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name.
It's Kano, yes.
No, there is.
Oh.
Oh, Carla.
About, I wanted to know what was your stand on the parent promise program?
On the Promise program?
Yes, the parent promise program, you said the inception of community colleges was to improve the workforce.
Yes.
The parents are already in that workforce. I hear so much talk about children graduating from high school going in, but they're children.
Right.
What about the older and average?
Great question.
It's a good question. At our institution, we do not have a parent promise program. We have the promise program that many other institutions have adopted. I heard that today. I wrote a note down to go back and ask about that, but I think it's a great opportunity for us to reach people that might have been missed in the previous programs. You know, education has really evolved, and it needs to stay relevant. So we need to continue to find ways to reach people that have perhaps missed or been underserved in the past.
Agree. And the community, yeah.
Yes.
The idea program is supposed to enforce the fact that some people historically just didn't have a chance. It wasn't so
Or they need to retool.
it's free if you've never graduated from college or never graduated from high school, that you can go just because you never graduated. That's your career if you never graduated. And so then they have those folks be an example to the kids coming out of high school. My dad, my mom, 40 went back to college.
Yeah. Our program, our Promise program, is relatively new in comparative to some other larger institutions, but it's proving successful, and we can always adopt additional ways to reach out to others as we move forward.
Yeah, that's one of the things when I was on the higher ed board that I enjoyed the most was watching the community colleges be agile and flexible to meet needs, and then retooling and retraining. It was incredible watching how effective the community colleges are in our state.
I think there's a question in the back row as well.
I'm the dean at my institution, and I feel like I have amazing support from my board. how would you advise others to be supportive of others in my position, of the leaders, the educators? How can we support our?
Okay.
Well, I think that it's important I think it's important for you to attend meetings because I think that shows your support to the community that elects us to sit there and make those decisions, but it does show your interest and your contribution to the overall institution. So I do think that's important. I also think it's important that you're active in the community. You're someone that's been put into a position of leadership within your institution, and it's important for us as board members to be active in our community, so it's also important for you to be active because anything that brings positive press, for lack of a better word, about your institution and you as an individual as that representation as a part of a civic club or whatever definitely helps.
I would agree. The only thing to add, that was, yeah, that was good.
Yeah. I would just add, I think so. We talked a little bit earlier about flying at that 20,000-foot view, and so it's that balance, right? You don't necessarily want your regents in the administrative side of things, but that being said, one of the reasons they are regents is that they bring subject matter expertise, and so involvement in the classroom, and so it's not uncommon in the board office of the tech system where we'll have a dean or a chair reach out and say, we've read the bio for Regent X, Y, or Z, and we would love to have them come and speak to a class. Would that be appropriate? And 9 times out of 10, our regents are just delighted to be involved in that educational mission. Going back to what was said, it's about the students. So those opportunities, I think, generally, regents will jump to.
Agree. Yep.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yes. Can you talk about relationships with other board members?
Sure. Actually, I don't really have personal relationships with other board members. Now, it is a small community, and I'm in business, and I have some of them, I guess one or so are my customer, but I personally don't really have a personal relationship. I know every one of them, but they kind of come from their part of our area, different towns. We kind of try to find people that would serve all the cities in our county, so that they're not all from one spot. So and I think you have to be careful. Let me say it that way, because it can be perceived if there's just a constant connection and we're at lunch together all the time out in the public. Not that I wouldn't enjoy that, but I just think that it might lend itself to question by people that are in our taxing district to say, I see them together all the time. That's just my personal opinion.
No, I agree. The only time I see the other board members is when we're traveling, when we go to a football game, and they're there, and we're in the president's, suite, which is actually the whole south end zone, so it's not. But we don't socialize, go to dinners, hang out at all. I mean, and when I go to towns that they're in, I don't reach out. Not because I don't like them. They're fantastic people, but I think it's important that, exactly what Carla said, that there's, and I don't think there's anything. I could go to dinner with Brad Weaver in San Antonio. That'd be fine.
Right.
But we see each other so much. We're in board meetings, and it's kind of like, okay, you go your way, I go mine, and we're real fortunate that our board is very unified and cohesive and very transparent and open about differences, and so it's been really good.
And I think on top of that, just being mindful of certain open meeting act requirements,
Right.
quorums, and things like
Exactly.
that. Even though there is a provision for social events, you can absolutely get together socially.
Sure.
But just being mindful not
Yeah,
to have
yeah.
deliberation on board business during those social events. Okay, I think I saw 2 hands and a third one over here. We'll start here in the middle of the room, and then we'll work our way this way.
Thanks. And I hesitate to ask this question, but I don't want to phrase it correctly. It's my observation that boards now have more overt political pressure on them than they have in the past. And my question is, how do you navigate that line?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, it's the mission of the organization, period. And if you're coming in and you've already pre-arranged outcomes because you think you're supposed to, that's not good. And I wouldn't serve on a board like that. I mean, it's too much time, and I'm not going to come in and go, well, I think somebody would want me to do this, and nobody calls me ahead of time and says, you need to do this. None of that happens.
Right.
And I don't want to be part of that. So I think it's keeping the purity of the missions. That's why I started with the mission statement, right? When I was on TRS, it was the pensions for the teachers. That's what mattered. It didn't matter what political party I was from. It was the teachers, right? And the endowment is a $75 billion endowment that needs to be taken care of for the universities and MD Anderson, and that's the mission. So, but it's a great question. Mm-hmm. It's a really good question, but I think we've been put in a place because, of our own character and integrity to put the mission first. And when you don't, you're quickly going to probably not be there. So,
for sure, you won't get elected again.
That's true.
But I do think it is the mission. It's the student first, the institution second, and then like I said, in a small area of taxing, even if you're in Austin, you are elected, and I'm going to do what I think is I was elected to do, and I guess if that's not satisfactory, then I wouldn't be there the next time.
Okay. There was one more in the towards the middle of the room, I believe.
Okay.
Is there still anybody for that one? No. Okay. All right. I think we have one. There was a hand I saw on this side. Okay. All right. This will be our last question in the interest of time. I think okay.
This was this last election with the overwhelming approval of the Proposition 8 with the child care thing. Do you think they've been truly considered having more space on campuses for child care there? Kids learn early that I want to go to college.
Yeah.
3, 4, 5. It's already planted that they have done. No matter what hospital it's not. Instead of waiting until high school
Right.
and performance.
Yeah.
So at that point, we've been around 7 and 17, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So I would say that we've talked about it even before the proposition that you mentioned, because it is a need, as we've kind of heard today in some of the open sessions, child care, et cetera, is a real need for students. But it has not, at this point in our institution, risen to the part. We would have to go, if we were going to, let's assume we are not going to retool an existing building, we would have to go to the voters and pass a bond to build that particular facility. So our community is going to have to want that totally before we would probably be able to offer that as an alternative to outside childcare. But I do think it's important, and it is on our wish list for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for time for us. I want to say thank you again to our panelists, Chairman Metzler and Regent Gott, for their candid and thoughtful responses. And if you'll just join me in giving them a round of applause, please.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Mm-hmm.